Evening all. I think a very important question in chess is how to survive a vicious attack, or sometimes called a hack attack. This was a very interesting game in round 4 of the FIDE Grand Prix, where there was such a hack attack. Fabiano Caruana was playing white against Mamedyarov, and it kicked off with d4. So we saw Mamedyarov play d5 after c4, c6, the Slav defense, super popular right now. Knight f3, knight f6. Now after e3, which closes in the bishop, that is actually one of the more popular moves. There's also knight c3, but e3, black usually actually plays bishop f5 here statistically, over 5,000 games. Also e6 is popular, closing in the bishop as well. That's a solid option as well, because the bishop can be sorted out later. But bishop g4 was played here, and now we see knight c3 after e6. Slight weakness of this bishop coming out is b7, and we see white targeting that now with queen b3. Now here black plays queen b6, encouraging white to close the centre with c5 to gain a tempo. Doubling the pawns is really quite harmless. So here actually there's a very interesting option instead that was played, which is the main move actually, which is knight h4. And at first it looks to be giving black an easy forcing move at any point g5, but that is creating weaknesses. Pawns don't go backwards. White is also has avoided the doubling of pawns, so this is a very interesting position. In fact, let's have a look at g5 here. G5 immediately here, the knight doesn't have to go back here. h3, bishop h5, and now the knight can go back here, or maybe even g4 is interesting. This is an interesting position, but possibly creating that weakness. The knight can go back here. I think that's the most popular choice in my live book. Over 50 games, knight going back here, with white having committed that weakness, that g5. Okay, so in the game after knight h4, we see actually the move bishop h5, and white now plays h3. So we get a kind of transposition into what's just been shown. g5, and Caruana's choice is in fact here not to play g4 but to play knight f3. He doesn't mind the double pawns here. That is a target on the g file potentially. If black takes, then taking here, and we can look forward to having that as a target with say e4 later. Okay, so black actually supported the g5 pawn, and now white, having created these weaknesses with that curious knight h4, but plays c5 now, so it doesn't mind the locking of the centre, and certainly not the exchange of queens here. This would be quite dynamic for white to take on b3. Black drops the bishop to c7, and we have bishop d3. Okay, for the moment white controls that e5 square adequately, because usually if the centre is closed like this, black has an attractive plan to try and break with e5. In this position, Mamedyarov tries to justify this construction to push with g4 with this preparatory move, rook g8. So is g4 a problem, or does it just weaken another square, the f4 square? Well, here this is a very powerful positional move in many respects. Just the queen comes back to c2, so keeping an eye on g6 potentially with that battery is useful. But also b4, b5 will be very discouraging, especially if black has any intention to try and castle queenside. The welcome committee on the queenside is pretty nasty here. Furthermore, b4 would support bishop b2 if white wants to keep a lock and key over the e5 break. And in fact we see a very comfortable position really after knight bd7, just simply b4. So dual purpose, either bishop b2 to lock down e5 or b5. Now you might think, well, what if taking or e5 here? Let's have a look. Black played bishop e7. Now if we try an e5 break here, what happens? I think this could be nice for white to use the f5 square potentially, even with bishop f5. This is an interesting option. So if e4 we can just drop back here, and this is a very interesting position. I think white's doing quite nicely here. You can still pursue b5. It's not a problem. It's closing the position. The king can come to the queen side potentially at some point. Let's say castling b5. That's pretty nasty. So yes, this looks as though e5 is not so major, even with bishop f5. But there's other moves as well. g4, which will lock down g5. White could take here, and even just play d takes. And this is another way of playing it. There are different ways of playing this position. Just trying to get the squares, the dark squares. So white's got a nice grip here potentially. Say here a3. This is a nice position. So e5 isn't particularly amazing here. Bishop e7 was played instead. Bishop b2. And now, very, very committal move indeed. This g4 move. It does weaken that f4, and white has got a ready-made maneuver here in only 2 steps. Can get f4 in principle. First he has to deal with this knight threat. H takes g, which limits black's options actually. If knight takes, black loses the bishop. Whoops. So here, if bishop takes, then white can get on, I think, with this plan. For example, knight e2 here, and this is looking quite nice, that use of the f4 square. So rook takes was played, hitting g2. Now, okay, if white castled queenside, then rook takes g2 weakens also f3 immediately, hitting the knight. So this is actually good for black. Also f2 is weak, so if we protect f3, rook takes f2. It's more than just an inconvenience. Looks pretty winning for black. If here the black invasion on the king side continues. So caution is needed here, and seemingly scary move to have to play. The king coming to the rescue of g2. So the question is here, balancing out the potential for b5 or black's g-file pressure. What's going to happen here? Well, black castled queenside. So does white still want to pursue b5? This might be a reasonable move, but here this bishop is a very interesting target and bonus points for knight e2 to f4 with more pressure on that bishop, and this is what's played for. Probably this is one of the strongest moves in the position. Stockfish's best choice here, knight e2 to get to this f4 square, where also, of course, it will be defending g2, so the doubling of rooks will be parried in advance, and we see this elegantly, knight f4 like clockwork, hitting the bishop, protecting g2. So the bishop is a problem here. Black is virtually forced to sacrifice the exchange. What else to do with the bishop? If bishop g6, then e6 is weak as well because of that knight looking in it. So bishop takes, black's losing the exchange here, has to give up the exchange because taking here, whack, knight takes e6. Also the rooks are disconnected. This is just ridiculous, this position. h6 drops, end of game really. So black is virtually forced to give up the exchange with rook takes f4. Has black got enough compensation here? So an exchange sack. Now the immediate queen takes f4 runs into rook h4. It's quite useful. If the queen drops back, then the knight can move, and white's grip on e5 is celebrated here. This is fairly unpleasant. White's still going to be playing b5, and taking, getting to that'll be the end of black's king safety. So basically here, black played bishop takes f3 first. Yeah, this looks like a powerful response to queen takes. So bishop takes f3 first, puncturing the h4 square control, so there's no rook h4 or anything now. Queen takes f4, so the exchange down with black threatening the pawn. White has to be very careful here. So this is hack attack territory for the exchange. So the first question is how to defend this f3 pawn. Now if it was actually defended with king e2, I think that might be one of the better ways to actually defend it. On bishop e2, it seems here black might be able to play h5, and this is still a little bit, this is quite dangerous for maybe doubling here for queen g2 check later. Just as a casual move, as an example, here queen g5 is unpleasant, so threatening queen g2. And if the queen comes in like this, for example, if there's an evacuation like this, then the h pawn can become a very dangerous asset. So it might not just be about attacking the king, but black's h pawn could prove very significant. So the way it was played here was very, very accurate, as you'd expect from Fabiano Caruana. King e2 keeps the rooks connected, ready not just for defending f3. Ooh, someone's motorbike's loud, but also keeping a watch, careful watch over the h6 pawn. So we see now rook g2, and this carries with it a venomous threat, knight g4, with the idea of queen e3, because that is a pin pawn. The power of the pin pawn or piece is an illusion. So the e3 control has been dropped after basically rook g2. You can assume e3 is weaker, and g3. But the immediate thing is knight g4, which has to be carefully defended against. A very, very good move is played here to defend this position. If we're too casual, well, just to show the power of knight g4, if bishop c3, which doesn't do anything, it's just for sake of example, knight g4 is just wipeout time, as a total wipeout threatening queen e3, and then knight takes f2. If here, f2 drops. So yes, so white has to defend against this knight g4 in advance. Plays a great move, queen c1, just offering an exchange of queens. We see queen g3, so f2 needs to be defended. So how to defend? Well, here I think this might actually be the best defense on queen e3, which wasn't played. That seems plausible, but maybe h5 is slightly annoying. The h pawn is slightly annoying. The way it was actually defended here was queen f1. And now things get really violent. With queen f1, they're all connected here, and it's got a big perk having all of the pieces connected here, that actually white can threaten to exchange off things with rook g1 to kill the tension in the position. Once that rook goes, there's less attacking potential. So that's a really great move to keep things connected for rook g1. If we had played queen e3, we're not really black's still maintaining that g1 square. And for example here, yeah, there's still potential for being annoying. I mean, let's say b5, h4, and things could get a bit unclear potentially. It takes, let's say something like this, h3. It's the h pawn being really annoying again. So it's a good idea to try and pounce for the exchange of rooks. So interesting, maneuver here, queen f1. So there's no real time actually for h5 here, in the light of, if h5 here, rook g1, no time for this h pawn to get to a significant point. So black gets really desperate. He's actually in a worse position now because of this rook g1. His pieces are kind of committed in this position. They're difficult to retract. If the queen moves back, we just play rook g1. Or even worse here, there's an elegant move here, queen takes g2, because we can trap the queen after. So this is end of game. An infiltration to the 7th rank after. So that's actually much stronger than this. In fact, black might be doing okay here, pardon me, with knight h5. Tactical. So this position looks very nice actually for black. Black's got prospects here on the dark squares, potentially. The knight f4, bishop f6. So yeah, this is interesting that the queen moving back. There's queen takes g2. Incredible resource. Queen takes g2 is the most forcing. Queen g8 to take on g2. Fantastic stuff. Okay, so we see black actually playing in this position the move knight g4, and it gets quite frightening now. What do we do about rook takes f2 check? Do we just take this knight? What's the idea? So black is a 2-7-6-4. You know, this knows what he's doing generally. Well, here the knight is actually taken, and it's a little bit scary. Queen takes g4 check, and the king now actually went to d2, so not minding potential bishop g5 check. I think on bishop g5 check, this wasn't played, but on bishop g5 check, king c3, and the checks have kind of run out. White's king has fled to safety, a bit like Capablanca Marshall. there's nothing much to show here. So we see king, after king d2, we see queen f4 check, not bishop g5, we see queen f4 check. Now here, if king c3 in this position, it might be interesting for black to play bishop f6. And this is getting a bit dangerous. On any rook takes f2, there's queen c1, eyeing the queen. So, but bishop f6 might be interesting for black a little bit, this position, although it's still in white's favour, technically. But Caruana played actually king e2, maybe taking time more to digest the position. He's not getting into a repetition, because now, after check, he varies his response. He doesn't play king d2. He plays the most accurate move now in the position, king e1. Now, there is a loose pawn here on b4 in theory, and the queen's on that fifth rank. So a very tactical move is played here from black. Knight e5. So what on earth is going on? Well, if it's taken, funny enough, this is just a draw now in this position, even though white's like more than a rook up. Queen takes b4 check, and what does white do? If king d2, sorry, if king d1 here, queen takes, it gets nasty. With queen d4 after, it actually gets pretty nasty, this position. Say like this, there's rook takes f2, and that can get really quite nasty indeed. White doesn't really want a position like this, where the queen is vastly centralized. There's a horrible pin. No, this is not good. It's a lot of damage. So, but also in this position, if king e2, this needed to be calculated, then white might be okay after this, possibly, but it's a bit scary. So white doesn't need this hassle basically, and there's also the possibilities of perpetual checks as well on king e2, with this queen g4 check, and maybe even better than going for the checks is bishop takes c5 here. It's just very, very scary stuff. So this position is giving black a very interesting play, with f2 being attacked here. This is extremely dangerous and to be avoided. So there does seem to be a lot of venom behind the knight sack if it was accepted. This position here, what do we do with the white pieces? In fact, yeah, it's pretty nasty. With the queen on f1, it's embarrassing. We're going to lose the queen next to rook f2. What does white actually do? Okay, so yeah, to be avoided. A much more conservative and strong move, bishop e2, limiting black's counterplay. So this pawn's not going to come into the equation, and he checks here. Bishop e2. Now, if knight f3 here, I think white can just take this and then play queen e2. And now move like king f1. It's fairly cozy. Yep, safety. So that's the sort of, less counterplay position to aim for. Black now played queen e4, trying his luck with knight d3 check now as the principal threat. Now, cool as a cucumber move to address this kind of thing. Well, there's two moves which could have addressed it. Well, one that's played king d1, getting out of the pin, but also apparently rook h3 could be quite nifty. If bishop h4, this is looking dangerous, but we can actually take this now and probably sack the queen with loads of pieces for it. That's okay for white. But yeah, there's enough pieces for the queen for sure if this is taken. Okay. So rook h3, or king d1 is played. These are very strong moves here against knight d3. Yeah, extreme prophylaxis is needed to anticipate the threats, neutralize them, neutralize counterplay. So here, counterplay is minimized. So white is threatening the knight. If the knight did move, I think it's end of game now. It's just committed to going all in now. Bishop g5 was played. If knight c4, I think white can just take that on c4. And now queen e2, just evict the queen. This is all starting to look as though black's got nothing. Run out of steam. So, okay, so after king d1 we see bishop g5. And now this is the time where white takes that knight here much more safely. Under the right circumstances here, white takes the knight. Queen takes b4, threatening mate. But there's one move here which is really incisive. In fact, I don't think anything else will do here against this mate threat. Funny enough. If queen e1, just to rule that out, queen a4 is checkmate. Ouch. If bishop c1, then this is no good either. Queen d4 check. You've got loose rook over here. And this position, instead of taking the loose rook, though, rook takes f2, and this is really good. So, okay, the best move is played in this position, addressing this mate threat very, very carefully. So king c2. Now black played, instead of queen d2, played queen takes c5. He's running out of steam, but white has to be careful. He doesn't want to play king here, this position. There's no point in playing that here. Rook takes f2 is really dangerous, very dangerous. If queen d1, in fact, in this position, this would be pretty devastating. After rook f3 check is a mate in 4, believe it or not. Very important to take these forcing moves into account. Black's trying to get that queen c4 mate. So if it takes here, queen c4, mating with like this, pretty nasty stuff behind the scenes here. So the king can't step out because of that tactical reason. Rook f3, it's getting mated. Ouch, that would be really bad. So very, very careful precision all the way was needed here, and this is no exception. This position, after queen takes c5 check, the king has to go to b1. Only move really to play for a win. King b1. So now we see rook takes f2. Again, there's not too many decent move choices here. White doesn't want to go into a pin. Pins are pretty nasty. Queen e1. It's not totally a pin because it's protected, but actually there's something really horrible about this potential queen e3, which is to come here. This would be the threat behind queen e3, getting on this diagonal, complementing the bishop. So white needs to keep control of actually this diagonal, and this next move elegantly does that. Queen d1, maintaining the advantage. It will be very problematic here if queen e1 was played. So it's not because it's a real pin on e1, but queen e3 threatens the nasty queen e4. What does white actually do here? White's forced to play some pyrotechnic move just to survive, like bishop b5, ridiculous. But whatever, you know, what else? Because there's also rook e2 on the cards. If a3, we just take on e2. So yeah, queen d1. White's playing super accurately, calmly in defence, assessing all the forcing moves and resources, the complements of the queen and the bishop, just to make sure he's controlling key diagonals. Okay, so queen e3 being played here. In this position, again, a super accurate move in this position is played, which is rook e1. If bishop d3, in this position rook d2 is pretty nasty, and then that's blown again, all the advantage. Black's got a massive position here, massive attack, hack attack. So super cool defense, you know, stopping any queen f8 business. This position is just better for black here. This is just pretty nasty. So the queen can even get onto the light square diagonal again. So another super accurate move, yes. White is playing super accurately here. Rook e1. You can't allow these forcing moves like rook d2. So rook e1. And it's here that black actually resigned. I thought when looking at this that queen d2 might be worth a punt. It's harmless by this stage. In fact, simplest is just to take. And now in this position, instead of losing bishop for nothing, white can actually just play king c2 here and offer the e1. We're protecting the bishop after. That's winning for white with two bishops up. So yeah, very, very precise defense, cool as a cucumber as you'd expect from Caruana. Black just resigning here. He hasn't got the queen e4 resource. That's been covered on that diagonal. But even here, I mean, this could have been tried actually, because it seems white has to play, that there is a pitfall for white, it seems, in this position, even in this position, that if white played bishop d3 here, black can apparently draw in this position. Can you see how? If I give you 5 seconds, starting from now. Apparently this is drawing. Rook takes b2. Then queen d4 check. Unbelievable. If king b3, we have the check here. Checks keep going. The queen and bishop are kind of complementary here. Yeah, this would be like nasty. So the final little thing here, if on the queen e4 check, the best move is not to allow any forcing move like rook b2, just play either queen c2 or queen d3. Strongest is apparently queen c2. On queen d3, rook takes e2 as possible. See, the queen is not supported by the king. So this position, which is still better for white. Here, a rook up. The pawns are not really a menace for the rook, but even stronger to keep the queen as supported as possible. Queen c2. And here now, yes, black is finally starting to run out of steam. Queen b4, we can just move the rook. And then white's going to be arranging an unentanglement now with no more attacking moves to use virtually. Yeah, white will start to play a4 and then make rook a3 to get the rook out. Say h5, we can play a4, say an argument, rook a3, we get the rook out. Yes, and we're actually stopping h3 there as well, as is my example, but we start to get, yeah, use the extra material. So yes, a lot of calculation and prophylaxis needed against all of black's threats. So remarkable defensive performance behind the scenes here. So first, starting from this rook g2, well, even starting from here, to assess the potential side effect asset in the h6 pawn, keeping things connected, not just against king safety and against f3, but against this potential menace of the h pawn. That's one point. The point here against prophylaxis against knight g4 and queen e3 has to be handled correctly. Mentioned bishop c3, another move which is not so good. I mean, say here, this, yeah, black's still surviving a bit longer here. So this queen c1, very good. Queen f1, so the queen can't even retract without queen takes g2. So white's got the forcing moves available. So black's investing a knight here, and this has to be taken. F2's being attacked. So we get this position where another knight's about to be thrown in to the attack with knight e5. What else there? Bishop g5 is not really doing much. So knight e5. White carefully avoids giving black all this stuff with queen takes b4. So he's sitting tight. There's knight d3 being introduced. Extreme prophylaxis against all the forcing moves. King d1, but also the pieces are protecting each other, so there's no major tricks here. Although, rook takes f2. I think that would be welcome. For example, this position, it doesn't matter about this one. This position is good for white. It just runs out of steam. So yeah, things seem to be solid enough here. Rook h3 was plausible against knight d3, but this sorts out knight d3, and we have this final this having to do with this. So, and also queen a4. Yes, that's principal double two move mate needs to be sorted out. So fantastic move here in the circumstance. King c2. We looked. We didn't. Did we consider what moves did we consider here? Queen d2 fails. Queen a4. Sorry, mentioned here. This king b1. King tucks away, and then that's okay. So yeah, white's always got this diagonal covered as well. There's always bishop d3. So yeah. So we see queen takes c5 check. King b1. Rook takes f2. Very accurate move. Queen d1, because now queen e3 to e4. The queen, it's a bit of a menace here. Black's queen, but yeah, white's sitting tight with queen d1, helping control this diagonal. Queen e3, and now this move, rook e1, sitting tight, able to answer queen e4 with queen c2 now. Yeah, so black really had enough. He could have, as I say, tried the check, just in case bishop d3 was played, but yeah, queen d3 or queen c2, and it's spelled out even more. There's nothing much going on for black here. Okay, yes, a bit scary that one, the ride, but in the end, black's attack ran out of steam with such precise play from Fabiano Caruana. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube. I hope you got something out of that for defending such a hack attack. It's a very scary experience. Thanks very much.